LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Now listen. My mom and auntie are putting together a family reunion this summer which will celebrate the Irish, English, Swedish branch of my family tree. The last time the bunch of us got together was for my brother's wedding 6 years ago, and let's face it, time flies by too fast. Like the old saying goes, weddings and funerals bring people together. There's really nobody left to get married, and we'd rather not wait until the latter, as it kind of puts a damper on the festivities. The ladies are putting together some events for this reunion. A lunch cruise on Lake Minnetonka, a family photo, and a group dinner at a hotel. For my contribution to the dinner, I had grand plans of creating some kind of amusing Ken Burns documentary about our family, but trying to distill 120 plus years history and be witty, it proved to be too daunting. If I was going to do something like that, I should have started working on it when my brother got married in 2016. So, I simplified it to a 6-chapter slideshow with music. Now, you have to be careful with slideshows. I've seen them be as interesting as watching paint dry, so I'm trying to keep it moving. I'd like to get some laughs in, and let's face it, I want a few tears too. I'm manipulative that way. I put out the call to everybody for family photos. I have quite a few myself, as thankfully my family did take a lot of pictures over the years. And those were the days when, after you took the photos, you had to take the exposed film to photomat stores. Photomats were these little tiny buildings, literally the size of outhouses with bright yellow roofs that sat in the middle of parking lots. I don't know how employees worked 8 hours in these things. You barely had enough room to turn around, and what did you do if you had to go to the bathroom? Did they give you a bucket? I would have constantly been in fear that a car would back into my store and take me, my bucket, and my little yellow-roofed shed with it. Our photomat was in the parking lot across the street from Merle Hay Mall, where you drove up and dropped your film off. And you didn't know if your pictures would be blurry until you got them back later, so you kept your fingers crossed and hoped for the best. For this slideshow, I've been sifting through hundreds of photos from the last century. But can you imagine if somebody goes through our photos from this century? My God, they will have to look at thousands of photos of artsy-fartsy flower pictures, countless selfies, and food. We didn't take pictures of our food back then because you had to pay for the pictures to be developed and printed. Plus, what would we have taken pictures of? Kraft macaroni and cheese? Ore-Ida tater tots? Hamburger Helper? In going through all these pictures and cleaning them up in Photoshop, it's interesting to see your history and story unfold. Seeing my Grandma May holding each of us grandkids, I can still hear her saying, "Bless your heart." I worked with this guy named Brian, who was also from the Midwest. I guess his mom used the term "bless your heart" as well, but she took it one step further. Brian said to me, "You never heard the bless your heart rule?" No. Apparently the rule is that if you start with "bless his or her heart," you can then follow it with pretty much anything, even an insult. Case in point, bless her heart, but she really is a jackass. I had never heard that rule, but it made sense. I wondered if my Grandma May knew about that rule, and after saying "bless her heart," would just keep that second part under her breath. She and Grandpa Lloyd had this neighbor 2 doors down in Sioux City named Virgil, or Virgie, as my family called her. She was this shrieking little Gladys Kravitz busybody with an old withered and hunched-over husband named Bobby, no doubt having had the life sucked out of him by a lifetime of living with Virgie. They loved spending money, but even more, they loved bragging about how much they had spent. Virgie and Bobby had spent a small fortune on a big picture window in their living room, talked about it incessantly, which bugged the crap out of Grandma May. I wonder if she added a tag onto "bless Virgie's heart." I guess we'll never know. But I do know that Lloyd used to tell Virgil and Bobby that other neighbors were outspending them, which only made Virgie spend more, and Grandpa Lloyd found that hysterical. Don't get annoyed. Get Swedish passive-aggressive on them and let the fun begin. Another Midwest phrase my friend Brian's mom used when she thought something was ridiculous was nonsense and shenanigans. I love that phrase. Shenanigans is such a great word. Old-fashioned and, according to the rhyming dictionary, only has 2 rhymes. Oscar Hammerstein used it in the musical Oklahoma and rhymed it with Flanagans. And in going through these hundreds of photos for my family reunion slideshow, my family has been guilty of a lot of nonsense and shenanigans, and in fact, an entire chapter of the slideshow is being dedicated to it. Come to think of it, much of my life has been filled with nonsense and shenanigans as well. I can absolutely attribute nonsense and shenanigans for helping me and my best friend Tony get through our lives in 1970s suburban Iowa. This has been well documented in many of these podcasts. One of our high school teachers and his wife lived down the street from me, and one night during our junior year, we were having play rehearsal at Urbandale High School. Tony and I were rummaging through the costume room looking for things to borrow. Things to steal for our garage theater company. The high school had different wings, and you could look out the window across a courtyard and see into classrooms and other wings. That night, we saw our teacher, who was my neighbor, sitting in his classroom with a girl who was a senior. It was kind of weird because this was at night. We turned off the lights in the costume room for a better view and saw the teacher now sitting next to the student with his arm around her. We channeled our inner Charlie's Angels and began following this teacher and student around in my parents' car. They would take off driving to Saylorville Lake at night, and we'd follow them, convinced that there was some major nonsense and shenanigans going on. And there was. At the end of that junior year, the teacher down the street took a night off from touching the student inappropriately and threw a party for the other teachers, no doubt to celebrate the exit of the class of 1980. One teacher described that class as the worst behaved class in a generation. This is the class that tried to sneak a float into that year's homecoming parade that had the words "Eat Me" spelled across it in colored tissue paper. The teacher's party was hopping, and Tony and I decided to go check it out firsthand. We climbed over 3 sets of chain-link fenced-in yards in order to secure a place in the teacher's backyard. We hid in the bushes so we could see what was going on. It was fun eavesdropping on all your teachers partying. Soon, however, a few very drunk guys started coming towards the bushes in which we were hiding. We panicked. Had they seen us? We couldn't do anything or climb the chain-link fence lest we be discovered. We held our breath as they came over to the bushes and proceeded to pee on them. Thankfully, we were far enough away to avoid splatter, but as soon as they stumbled back to the party, we hightailed it over the fence into the Smith's backyard. A bit later, we were walking down my street, which was lit only by a dim streetlight. The teachers' cars were parked, and one car was a little hot rod. For some reason, Tony said, "Let's walk on the cars," and proceeded to walk on the hot rod, loudly denting in the roof. Suddenly we heard, "What the hell are you doing?" And we took off as a few drunken teachers started chasing us down the dark street. Thankfully, it was our neighborhood, so we knew where to go and whose fences we could scale to avoid having the crap beaten out of us. We decided to call that evening's shenanigans a night. The teacher ended up getting busted for carrying on with the student. Not sure how the hot rod fared, but I don't think it was good. Our senior year, we knew we would soon be escaping Iowa, so we kicked up the nonsense and shenanigans. We were both working in theater that year, which gave us a perfect excuse to use my folks' car to go to rehearsals and performances. Of course, we also used it for scooping the loop, sometimes with my baby brother in tow, poking his head out of my dad's sunroof and screaming, "Pussy!" at the top of his lungs. We used the car to go to the local downtown gay bar called OP's. Though we were underage, we spent many evenings there having vodkas with orange juice while dancing to Funkytown and Celebration by Kool and the Gang. We saw a bunch of supposedly straight married men we knew who were obviously escaping their pretend heterosexual lives to be themselves for a night. In addition to the teacher, we also stalked a closet gay born-again dentist, but that's another story. Yes, in retrospect, we were probably borderline serial stalkers and should have found a support group, but we just looked at it as innocent nonsense and shenanigans. And you think this stuff ends when you grow up? Yeah. At my day job, decades later, my friend Jackie, whom I call my work wife, really became my co-conspirator in nonsense and shenanigans. Nothing terrible, mind you. My days of automobile stalking are long over, but you have to have some laughs to get through the day-to-day of working in an office. I mean, if you've worked in one, come on, you know. Over a decade ago, Jackie and I were in cubicles next to each other, and our former boss, this very intense techie woman who wore pantsuits, sensible shoes, and had anger management issues, moved us apart to opposite sides of the floor as she thought we were having too much fun. Really? You're separating us? It made me laugh so hard because here I was, almost turning 50, and still getting separated from the other naughty students in class, something that had started at Olmsted Elementary School back in Iowa. Of course, Jackie and I just went rogue and became experts in instant messaging and texting, which is the digital equivalent of passing notes in class, and we still had fun. Sometimes I'd catch our soon-to-be canned Birkenstock-wearing boss pausing just outside my now solitary cubicle, hearing me chuckling and laughing to myself before moving on. And all I could think of was, well, bless her heart.
LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two.